Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Coach Café. My name is Simon Amash. Today we're going to be going over strength. What is strength? And we're doing so with the lens of high performance. So strength is force application. Force, think of push or pull. So we're going to kind of deep dive into this today to kind of get you thinking about how can you have more strength that is athletic. So for example, think of basketball. Force application is going to be everywhere. So for instance here, say someone is like blocking, so they're breaking real quick to be able to create space for a jump shot, that is force application. Say someone is deking, so change of direction, that is going to be force application. Say someone is going to be accelerating on that first step, that is force application. And everyone likes to jump, so let's check it out. Say someone is going to be going for a layup or for a jump shot, this is also force application. So now I want to be talking about force, so strength. So force application when we're looking in the concentric. So if you remember, concentric is when the muscle is getting shorter. So think about things like sprinting or throwing is going to be concentric. So what I want us to kind of look at now is that when we have no movement, so say an isometric movement, I can be stronger than when I move fast. So the faster I move, the harder it will be for me to apply force. Okay? And this is important because if you're thinking about a pitcher, the pitcher is going to be throwing the ball by applying more force to it. But the faster they throw, the less time they have to apply force. So when we look at here the impulse, we have the rate of force development and we have the peak force. So the peak force is going to be very important because we want that peak force. And when we have less time, that peak forces can be less. So the rate at which we can develop force is really, really important. So when you're going to be doing strength training, there's times where you're going to be working on how fast you can develop that force. Because if we look at the graph at the bottom here, I have time and I have force. Say I'm asking someone to like do a jump squat, right? It might be the line here that's full. This is the peak force, this is the impulse. So this is the amount of force they're able to develop. But now say I get them like under a bar and I ask them to do an isometric pull. The force they can develop is much, much higher than the peak force they could develop during a jump. So there's going to be a relationship between like the velocity of the movement and how much force you can develop. But there's also a force reserve. And there's a force reserve compared to body weight. So let's do a little experiment to just kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So when we're talking about high performance strength, a lot of people when you see strength, they think of muscle size. So I'll show the guns, guys. Okay, I got bigger legs because I used to be doing cycling. But if we're talking about athletic strength and being able to express force rapidly, let's see what happens. So I got the bigger legs. These guys got smaller legs, but look what happens when we jump. Ready? 1, 2, 3. They jump way higher than I did, but I got the bigger legs. So the size equals strength. Let's check it out. So when we're talking about strength, which is force application for high performance, we have to make a nuance between size and strength. So if we look at Angus's and my quads, I probably have a slightly bigger quad than he does. But now, we saw earlier that Angus can jump way higher than I can. Let's see what happens now with the strength. Okay, so now we can see we're upping the weight. This is getting heavy for me. How's it for you, Angus?
Decently heavy, but
decently heavy? I feel like I'm getting close to my max. Yet, I have the bigger legs. Let's check out what happens. For once?
yeah.
I can't lift it.
You can.
See if you can. You want more in?
Maybe, but I don't hurt these.
So, Angus is the stronger guy. Yeah. Quad size, right? So don't think size equals strength. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So what do we see so far? When we're talking about strength, we're talking about force application. So what's important for force application? The direction of force application when you train, the speed at which the force application, but also that size does not always mean more force. So now we're going to compare David and Angus. So David is a power lifter. We're going to show him what he can do after on the bar. We'll see if he can lift more than Angus, and we'll see if he can jump higher than Angus. So Angus, show us how high you can jump. Awesome. You want to have one more try?
Yeah, one more try.
Sweet. Perfect. Okay, so we measured Angus's his reach, and we'll measure his height, and then we'll compare with David after. Now, we're also going to compare Angus's strength compared to his body weight. So how many times he can lift his own body weight, and maybe we'll have some clues as to what's happening here. Okay, stay tuned. So let's measure what Angus did. So he was able to jump 10 feet 2 inches, and his reach is 7 feet 9 inches. Okay, let's compare. So now we can calculate his jump height, we have his weight, and his strength. So we'll give you all those stats, and we'll compare with David. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we have David here. David is a power lifter, extremely strong man. So this is what Angus was able to lift. David, show us if this is possible for you to lift. Nice and easy. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to get David to load the bar as much as he feels he could for a 1 rep max. So let's check out what David can do. David is attempting here to do a 1 rep max at 600 pounds. Okay, awesome, super impressive. So there's a lot of force here. So now let's check out what he can do when the force application is very quick with the jump. And let's compare to Angus what he does. Okay, so now we're going to be measuring David's reach so that we can calculate how much he jumps. So he is at 7 feet and 6 inches. Awesome. So now we're going to be measuring how much David can jump. So jumping is force application, which is strength. But now he has less time to develop the force. So let's see what happens. Let's see what you got. You got 3 trials to get the highest. So 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Good. Now let's measure how high he went. So in conclusion, what we saw is that Angus is able to jump 29 inches. His strength compared to his body weight is at 2. He can lift 2 times his body weight. Whereas David is able to lift 3 times body weight, but he was only able to jump 24 inches, which is 5 inches less than Angus. So when we talk about force for high performance, force is everywhere, okay? So I cannot jump as high because, as you saw, I don't have enough force or strength reserve. But the other thing that we need to consider is the rate of force development. So Angus trains more rate of force, so how fast he can develop that force, and that's why he can jump higher. Whereas David is extremely strong, so he has a big force reserve, but he hasn't been training that rate of force development. If he was able to train the rate of force development, or he trained it more, he could probably jump higher because he has more reserve. So when we look at body weight to strength, it's important to look at that. So I hope you're thinking about strength for athletic high performance in a little bit different way, and that you can see that strength reserve is important, but how fast you can develop is important. The vector, the angle, whether you're braking, you're just staying stationary, or you're accelerating is also important. So as a coach, I hope that this was thought-provoking and that maybe you can change different things. Look out for our next video. We're going to be talking about plyometrics and different ways to develop power for that rate of force development. See you next time.